Eren Cole had always believed that metal, unlike people, made sense. Metal obeyed rules. It expanded when heated, contracted when cooled, and cracked only when pushed beyond what it could endure. It never lied about its limits. It never pretended to be stronger than it was. And most importantly, when metal broke, it never blamed you for it. People, on the other hand, were much more complicated. This was the last thought he had before the explosion threw him face first into the gray dust of Ironscar's outer ridge. The impact knocked the air from his lungs and replaced it with the bitter taste of iron and ozone. His ears rang violently, as if someone had struck a bell inside his skull and forgotten to stop. For a few seconds, he simply lay there, staring at the ground, wondering if he had died. It would have been inconvenient, mostly because he still had tools to return to the maintenance bay. He lifted his head slowly. The battlefield stretched around him in silent aftermath. The fight had ended quickly, too quickly. Human defensive drones lay scattered across the ridge, their blackened shells still glowing faintly where energy weapons had carved through them with surgical precision. The portable shield generator Eren had been assigned to repair was now half buried beneath debris, its once proud emitter bent like a broken finger. "Well," he muttered hoarsely, coughing dust from his throat, "that's definitely not covered under warranty." He rolled onto his back and stared up at the sky. Ironscar's sky was not blue. It was a pale metallic gray, streaked with faint ribbons of light that shimmered like distant reflections. Orbital defense structures hung high above, their shapes barely visible against the dim glow of the dying sun. They looked less like machines and more like patient predators. He wondered briefly if they were watching him specifically. He hoped not. He had always disliked being watched while lying in embarrassing positions. A shadow fell across him. Eren squinted. A figure stood above him, tall and perfectly still. The alien soldier's armor was smooth and angular, composed of overlapping plates that reflected the dim light in muted tones. Its helmet concealed its face completely, giving it the unsettling appearance of something that had never needed to express emotion. Eren raised one hand weakly. "Hello," he said. "If you're here to complain about the generator, I was just getting to it." The soldier did not respond. It simply watched him. Eren cleared his throat. "I assume you're not here to surrender." Still nothing. He sighed. "Worth asking." The soldier raised its arm. A faint hum filled the air as a containment field formed around Eren's body. It pressed against him gently but firmly, lifting him off the ground without physical contact. He floated there awkwardly, his arms slightly outstretched. He had never floated unwillingly before. It was not his preferred method of transportation. He looked down at himself. "Well," he said quietly, "this is new." Two more soldiers approached, their movements synchronized with unsettling precision. They examined him briefly, as if confirming he was intact. Eren resisted the urge to wave again. He had a strong suspicion it would not improve his situation. They carried him across the battlefield without speaking. Their silence was not hostile. It was simply absolute. It reminded him of machines that had no need for unnecessary functions. He wondered if they found humans equally inefficient. They brought him to a transport craft waiting beyond the ridge. The craft was unlike any human ship he had seen. Its surface flowed smoothly, with no visible seams or joints. Its shape curved inward, like something designed by nature rather than engineering. The containment field guided him inside. The interior was quiet, illuminated by soft white light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The field released him gently onto the floor. He stumbled slightly, catching himself. No restraints followed, no threats, no weapons pointed at his head, which he decided was deeply suspicious. One of the soldiers stood before him. Slowly, deliberately, it reached up and removed its helmet. Eren blinked. The face beneath was unmistakably humanoid. Smooth skin, calm expression, and long, elegant ears that extended gracefully behind her head. She studied him with steady, intelligent eyes. Not with hatred, not with cruelty, with curiosity. He stared back. He had expected monsters. He found someone who looked far too capable of understanding him, which was, in many ways, worse. She tilted her head slightly, observing him the way he might observe a device he had never seen before. He realized he was doing the same thing. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then, without thinking, he said, "I should probably mention that I'm not the best human you could have captured." Her expression did not change. He gestured weakly toward the battlefield outside. "I fix things. Mostly things that other people break." A pause, then, unexpectedly, she spoke. Her voice was calm and clear. "You repair machines." It was not a question. He nodded slowly. "Yes." She watched him a moment longer. Then she said something that made no sense at all. "You will come." He frowned. "I feel like I don't have much say in that." She did not answer. Instead, she turned and walked toward the interior of the craft. The soldiers beside him remained still, waiting. Eren looked between them and the open corridor ahead. He sighed again. "Well," he murmured, brushing dust from his sleeve, "this is either the beginning of a very interesting story or a very short one." He followed her. Behind them, the craft lifted silently from the surface of Ironscar, and far above, beyond the gray sky and the silent machines that guarded it, something ancient waited, broken and patient, as if it had already decided that his arrival was not an accident at all. The transport craft did not feel like it was moving. That was the first thing Eren noticed. He had traveled in ships before, cargo haulers that rattled constantly, military carriers that hummed with suppressed violence, and once, briefly, a diplomatic vessel that smelled faintly of recycled citrus and quiet disappointment. All of them vibrated. All of them reminded you that they were machines forcing themselves through space with effort. This ship did none of that. It moved with the unsettling confidence of something that did not struggle. Eren stood near the curved wall of the interior corridor, his hands loosely at his sides. No restraints, no guards pointing weapons at him. Just silent alien soldiers standing nearby like patient statues. He cleared his throat. "So," he said to no one in particular, "I assume there's a reason you didn't just shoot me." No one answered. He nodded slowly. "That's fair. I wouldn't answer me either." The alien woman who had removed her helmet earlier walked ahead of him, her posture calm and unhurried. Her long ears angled slightly backward, not in aggression, but in what he suspected was attention. Every movement she made seemed deliberate, efficient without being mechanical. He wondered briefly if she ever tripped. He hoped she did. It would make her less intimidating. They reached an opening that resembled a doorway only in the most generous interpretation of the word. The wall simply separated, its surface flowing apart like liquid metal, responding to an invisible command. Beyond it was a chamber filled with soft white light. The air smelled clean, not sterile, not artificial, just clean. Eren stepped inside cautiously. The wall behind him sealed itself without a sound. He turned. Still no restraints. Still no threats. He was beginning to feel personally offended by the lack of hostility. The alien woman faced him. Up close, he could see subtle details he had missed before. Her skin was smooth, pale but warm in tone. Her eyes were dark, steady, and focused with a kind of clarity he rarely saw in humans. And her ears, those long, elegant ears, shifted slightly as she observed him, as if responding to sounds he could not hear. He gestured toward the room. "This is the part where you explain why I'm not dead, right?" She studied him silently. He pointed at himself. "Prisoner, enemy combatant, occasional maintenance technician. Statistically speaking, my life expectancy should be much worse right now." A pause, then she spoke. "You are not a combatant." He blinked. "Well, I appreciate you noticing that." She tilted her head slightly. "You did not carry a weapon." He considered that. "I was carrying a plasma wrench." "That is not a weapon." He opened his mouth, then closed it. He had in fact used it as a weapon once. It had not gone well. He decided not to mention that. She stepped closer, not threatening, not cautious, simply closer. Her eyes moved across his face, studying him with open curiosity. "You repair," she said. He nodded. "Yes." Another pause. Then she said, "You will be evaluated." He frowned. "That sounds medical." She did not respond. He tried again. "Should I be worried?" She considered him for a moment. "No." He exhaled slowly. "That's exactly what someone would say before something worrying happens." She did not smile, but something in her expression shifted, slightly, as if she almost did. Before he could analyze that further, the floor beneath his feet hummed softly. A circular section rose upward, forming a low platform. Symbols appeared along its surface, glowing faintly. Eren looked down at it, then back at her. "I assume this is safe." "Yes." He stepped onto it carefully. Nothing happened. He waited. Still nothing. He relaxed slightly. Then the platform erupted in light. He yelped and stumbled backward, nearly losing his balance. The light surrounded him, scanning him from head to toe in a rapid cascade of shifting patterns. He froze. "I was not prepared for that part," he said. The light faded. The platform lowered back into the floor. The alien woman stepped forward again. Her expression remained calm. "He is structurally intact," she said to one of the soldiers behind him. Eren frowned. "Structurally intact?" He looked down at himself. "I feel like that's the bare minimum." No one laughed. He sighed. Tough audience. She turned back to him. "You will come." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I feel like that's becoming a theme." The wall opened again. Beyond it, a long corridor stretched into the distance, its curved surfaces lined with faint streams of light that pulsed gently, like veins carrying energy through a living organism. He hesitated, then asked, "Can I ask where we're going?" She paused, looked at him, then said, "To see the Queen." He blinked. He waited for the part where she clarified that she meant someone important, but not literally royalty. She did not clarify. He pointed at himself again. "You're taking me to your Queen." "Yes." He stared at her, then laughed softly. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. "Of course you are," he murmured. "That's exactly where someone like me ends up." He gestured vaguely at the corridor. "Captured during a battle, taken to an alien fortress world, brought before the Queen." He shook his head slightly. "I knew I should have stayed in the repair bay." She watched him quietly, then said something unexpected. "You are not afraid?" He thought about that, considered the truth carefully, then shrugged. "I am," he admitted. "I just don't see how panicking would improve my situation." For the first time, she looked at him not as an object to be examined, but as a person to be understood. She turned and began walking again. He followed, because there was nothing else to do. Because somewhere ahead a queen waited. And because, for reasons he could not explain, he felt that whatever happened next would change his life in ways no machine ever had. Ironscar was not built like a human world. Human cities grew outward, messy and impatient, stacking necessity on top of necessity until they resembled arguments frozen in metal and glass. Ironscar, however, had been built with intention. Every surface curved with quiet confidence, every structure rising as if it had always belonged exactly where it stood. Eren noticed this immediately. He noticed everything immediately. The transport craft descended without sound into an opening that had not existed moments before. The landing platform formed beneath them like a thought becoming real. The walls around it shimmered faintly, composed of metallic alloys that shifted tone depending on how the light touched them. He stepped out slowly, half expecting gravity to misbehave out of spite. It didn't, which was, honestly, a relief. The alien woman walked ahead of him, her pace neither fast nor slow. She did not look back to see if he followed. She simply assumed he would. He did, because again, he had no better plan. The air inside the structure was cooler than outside, carrying a faint scent of ionized metal and something else, something older. Not decay, not damage, just age. The corridor stretched forward, impossibly smooth, its walls broken only by faint streams of light that pulsed at steady intervals. Eren watched those pulses carefully. They reminded him of a heartbeat, which was an unsettling thought, considering he was inside a building. He glanced at the alien woman. "Does your architecture always feel like it's alive?" She did not slow. "Yes." He waited for elaboration. None came. He nodded anyway. "Good, that's comforting." They passed other aliens along the way. Each of them bore the same unmistakable features: humanoid form, calm expressions, and those long, elegant ears. Some wore armor, others wore fitted garments composed of materials Eren couldn't identify. None of them spoke, but all of them looked at him, not with hatred, not with fear, with curiosity. He tried not to wave. It was harder than expected. Eventually, the corridor widened into a massive chamber. Eren stopped walking without realizing it. The ceiling rose high above, supported by immense structural arcs that resembled the ribs of some ancient metallic creature. At the center of the chamber stood a platform, circular and elevated, surrounded by columns of faintly glowing energy. It was beautiful. Not in the way human structures tried to be beautiful, with decoration and excess. It was beautiful because it did not need to try. He exhaled slowly. Your builders were very confident. The alien woman stopped beside him. Yes. He gestured vaguely upward. I can tell. Nobody builds something like this unless they're absolutely certain it's not going to fall on them. She tilted her head slightly. It will not fall. He smiled faintly. I believe you. They continued forward. As they approached the center platform, he noticed something else. Sound, or rather the lack of it. The entire chamber existed in a kind of perfect quiet. Not silence exactly, but the absence of unnecessary noise. No machinery grinding, no ventilation humming, just stillness. It made him acutely aware of his own breathing. He tried to breathe more quietly. He failed. They reached the base of the platform. The alien woman stopped. She turned to face him fully now. You will remain here. He blinked. This seems like the part where something important happens. She did not deny it. Instead, she stepped away, moving toward the far side of the chamber. He watched her go, then looked around. He was alone, completely alone. He shifted his weight awkwardly. Well, he murmured to himself, this is fine. He clasped his hands together, then unclasped them, then put them behind his back. Then immediately felt like that made him look guilty. He moved them to his sides again. Waiting, he realized, was significantly harder when you did not know what you were waiting for. Time stretched, or maybe it didn't. Ironscar had a way of making time feel irrelevant. Then the chamber changed. It was subtle at first. The light shifted, not brighter, just different. The energy columns around the platform pulsed once, slowly, like a breath being taken. Eren straightened instinctively. Something was coming. He had spent his entire life repairing broken systems, restoring function to things that had lost it. He understood better than most the difference between inactivity and anticipation. This was anticipation. He heard footsteps, soft, measured, approaching from behind him. He turned and saw her. She was taller than the others, not by much, but enough. Her presence filled the space around her without effort. Her dark hair fell loosely behind her shoulders, framing a face that was calm but not distant. Her long ears angled slightly outward, marking her unmistakably as one of Ironscar's people. But there was something else, something heavier, not physical weight, authority. She wore no armor. She did not need to. Her eyes found him immediately, not scanning, not assessing, seeing. He realized suddenly that this was the queen. He had never met royalty before. He had imagined it would involve more warning. He opened his mouth, closed it, then said the only honest thing he could think of. I hope I'm not in trouble. She stopped a few steps away. Her expression did not change, but her eyes studied him with an intensity that made him feel transparent. You are the human, she said. Her voice was calm, steady, and carried the quiet weight of someone who had never needed to raise it. He nodded slowly. Yes. A pause, then she asked, You repair broken things. He hesitated, then answered truthfully. I try. Her gaze did not waver. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said something that made his heart beat faster. You will repair something for me. He blinked. Of all the things he had expected, that had not been one of them. He gestured lightly toward himself. You brought me across a battlefield, into your fortress, to fix something. Yes. He let out a slow breath. Then despite everything, despite the alien world and the impossible circumstances, despite the fact that he stood before a queen who could end his life with a word, he smiled faintly. Well, he said, that's definitely a better outcome than execution. Queen Kara did not immediately explain what she wanted repaired. Instead, she watched him. It was not the kind of watching Eren was used to. Engineers watched machines with suspicion, soldiers watched enemies with readiness, and supervisors watched workers with disappointment. This was different. She watched him as if she expected him to reveal something without speaking. He resisted the urge to check if something was stuck to his face. He cleared his throat gently. I should mention, he said carefully, my repair experience is mostly structural systems, mechanical joints, energy relays, things that explode if you ignore them too long. She did not react to the joke, which was disappointing but not unexpected. Instead, she turned slightly and gestured behind her. Two figures stepped forward, carrying something between them. At first, Eren did not understand what he was seeing. Then the light shifted, and he did. It was a sword, not just any sword. Even broken, it carried presence. Its length was nearly the span of his entire arm, its surface composed of layered alloys that shimmered with faint internal patterns. The blade had fractured near its center, the break uneven, as if the weapon had resisted its own destruction. The two halves were held together by a containment field that hummed quietly, preventing them from falling apart completely. Eren stared at it. He forgot briefly where he was. Forgot the queen. Forgot the alien world. He stepped closer instinctively. Can I? He began, gesturing. Kara nodded once. The figures lowered the blade carefully onto a raised platform before him. The containment field dimmed slightly. Eren leaned in. He did not touch it. Not yet. He examined the fracture line first. His eyes traced every irregularity, every microscopic imperfection visible along the surface. He frowned, then leaned closer, then crouched slightly, then tilted his head the other way. He realized distantly that the queen was watching him very closely. He did not comment on that. Instead, he murmured quietly, almost to himself. This wasn't just force. Kara spoke behind him. No. He glanced at her, then back at the blade. The structure isn't failing, it's refusing. He stopped, realized how strange that sounded. He pointed at the fracture. The material isn't behaving like damaged alloy, it's behaving like it's choosing to remain separate. Silence followed that. He winced slightly. I realize how ridiculous that sounds. Kara did not laugh. Instead, she stepped closer. How do you know this? He hesitated, then answered honestly. Because I've seen machines do something similar. She waited. He shrugged slightly. Not literally choosing, obviously, but systems that stop functioning, not because they can't continue, but because something about their state makes continuation impossible. He looked at the blade again. This isn't broken in the normal way. He reached out slowly, then stopped. He looked at Kara. May I? She studied him for a moment, then nodded. He placed his fingers gently against the flat of the blade. It was cold, but not lifeless. He frowned again. The alloy composition was unlike anything he had encountered. Layered energy channels ran beneath the surface, dormant but intact. The fracture had not destroyed those channels, it had interrupted them. He glanced up. How long has it been like this? Kara answered without hesitation. 19 cycles. He nodded slowly. That's a long time. He did not ask what had happened. He wasn't sure he needed to. He could feel it. Not emotion exactly, but history. He removed his hand, exhaled slowly. This can't be repaired the way your engineers tried to repair it. Kara's expression did not change. They have failed. He nodded. Yes. He gestured lightly. They approached it like a damaged object. He paused, then added quietly, It isn't. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, but heavy. She studied him carefully. You believe you can repair it? He hesitated. He had learned long ago that confidence without understanding was dangerous. He chose his words carefully. I believe I can try. A faint shift in her posture. Not disappointment, not relief, something in between. He pointed at the fracture again. It won't respond to force. It won't respond to precision reconstruction. He met her gaze. It needs restoration, not correction. Another pause, then she asked, What do you require? He blinked. He had expected resistance, skepticism, not trust. He thought for a moment, then said, A forge. She tilted her head slightly. We have many. He smiled faintly. I need one that doesn't treat this like a machine. She studied him, then unexpectedly said, You speak strangely. He chuckled softly. I've been told that before. For the first time, something changed in her expression. Not quite amusement, but close enough that he noticed. She turned, gestured for him to follow. He did, because he understood now. This was why he was here, not as a prisoner, not as an enemy, but as something else, something far more dangerous, someone who had been trusted. The royal forge of Ironscar did not resemble any forge Eren had ever seen. There was no roaring fire, no smoke, no oppressive heat pressing against his skin. Instead, the chamber breathed with quiet energy. Circular emitters were embedded into the floor and ceiling, forming a vertical corridor of suspended force. Metallic rings floated in perfect alignment, rotating slowly around an invisible center. Each movement was precise, deliberate, and completely silent. It was less like a forge and more like a place where reality itself could be persuaded to change its mind. Eren stood at the entrance, staring upward. Well, he murmured, this is either the most advanced forge I've ever seen, or the most polite execution chamber. Queen Kara stood beside him. It is a place of creation, she said. He nodded slowly. That's reassuring. He stepped forward cautiously. The air felt different here, not heavier, denser, as if the room itself was aware of its purpose. He walked toward the center platform, where a circular surface waited, smooth and unmarked. He crouched beside it, examining the faint seams along its edge. Gravitational compression emitters? He said quietly. Kara watched him. You recognize them? He shrugged. Not exactly. Human versions are much louder and much more likely to explode. He paused. These seem calmer. He immediately regretted using that word. Machines were not calm. Machines were functional. And yet this one did feel calm. He placed his hand lightly on the surface. It responded instantly. A faint ripple of light spread outward from the point of contact, acknowledging him. He froze. That's new, he said. Kara tilted her head slightly. It recognizes presence. He looked at her. Does it recognize incompetence? She did not answer. He decided that was probably wise. Two attendants entered behind them, carrying the broken sword. The containment field surrounding it hummed softly, its faint blue light flickering like something uncertain of its own stability. They lowered it carefully onto the platform. The moment it touched the surface, the forge reacted. The floating rings above shifted position slightly. The air vibrated faintly. Eren felt it in his chest. Not sound. Resonance. He leaned closer, studying the fracture again. Up close, he could see things he had missed before. Not damage. Interruption. The internal energy pathways had not been destroyed. They had withdrawn, like nerves recoiling from injury. He frowned. Kara stepped closer. You see something? He nodded slowly. Yes. He hesitated, then spoke carefully. It isn't refusing repair. She watched him. It's waiting. Silence followed that. He realized how absurd that sounded. He gestured awkwardly at the blade. I know it's just metal. He paused. Mostly. He placed both hands gently on either side of the fracture. The forge reacted immediately. The floating rings rotated faster. Light formed between them, faint at first, then stronger. The platform beneath the sword hummed, its surface emitting controlled pulses of energy. Eren did not activate anything consciously. It responded to his presence. He swallowed. That's mildly terrifying. Kara did not move. He closed his eyes briefly. Not because he needed to, because it helped him think. He had spent his life repairing machines others had given up on. He had learned something important along the way. Force was rarely the answer. Understanding was. He opened his eyes again. He spoke quietly. Not to Kara, not to the attendants. To the blade. I'm not here to replace you. He winced slightly. He was talking to a sword. He had officially reached a new level of professional embarrassment. He continued anyway. I'm here to help you remember how to be whole. Nothing happened. He sighed softly. Worth trying. Kara watched him closely. You believe it hears you. He shrugged. I believe intention matters. He paused. And if it doesn't, at least I'll look insane in a memorable way. For the first time, Kara's lips curved slightly. Not fully, but enough. He noticed. It made him feel strangely victorious. He focused again. The forge was waiting. Not forcing, waiting. He adjusted his stance, placed his hands more firmly against the blade. He did not push. He did not command. He listened, and slowly, faintly, the energy within the broken halves responded, not joining, not yet, but acknowledging. He inhaled sharply. Kara saw it. What is happening? He answered without looking at her. It's deciding if it trusts me. He paused, then added quietly, I hope it does. Because he realized in that moment that this was no longer about repair. It was about permission. The forge did not obey him. That was the first thing Eren understood. It listened, yes. It responded, yes. But it did not obey. It was not a tool waiting for instruction. It was a system waiting for alignment. And that meant he could not rush it, which was unfortunate because every instinct he had developed over years of emergency repair screamed at him to act faster. He kept his hands steady on either side of the broken sword. The fracture remained, unchanged, but no longer silent. The faintest threads of light moved beneath the surface of the alloy, like distant lightning trapped inside metal. He exhaled slowly. Okay, he murmured. That's new. Behind him, Queen Kara stood without speaking. She had not moved in several minutes. He wondered if her legs ever got tired. He glanced over his shoulder briefly. You know, he said quietly, in human repair work, this is usually the part where something explodes. She did not react. He nodded to himself. Good. Just setting expectations. He turned his attention back to the blade. He needed to understand what it was made of, not just physically, structurally, conceptually. He stepped back slightly and examined the floating rings of the forge. They had adjusted themselves automatically, forming a narrower alignment around the sword. Their rotation was slow, deliberate, like careful breathing. He reached toward one of the nearby control interfaces. It appeared before his hand instantly, a translucent surface filled with alien symbols. He stared at it. It stared back. They understood absolutely nothing about each other. Right, he said softly. This may take a moment. He pressed one of the symbols at random. The forge hummed louder. He froze. I regret that immediately. The floating rings accelerated slightly. Energy flowed downward in controlled streams, passing harmlessly through the blade. The fracture glowed faintly, then dimmed again. No damage. No progress. He relaxed slightly. Okay, he whispered. No catastrophic failure yet. That's encouraging. He pressed another symbol. This time, the platform beneath the blade adjusted its gravitational pressure. The sword lifted slightly, suspended in perfect equilibrium. Not supported. Balanced. He blinked. Oh, he said softly. That's clever. He circled the platform slowly, watching how the blade responded. The fracture line was no longer rigid. It had softened, not physically but energetically. The internal pathways were beginning to acknowledge each other again, not reconnecting, remembering. He reached out carefully. His finger stopped just short of touching it. He hesitated, then said very quietly, You're not broken. He was aware of how ridiculous that sounded. He did not care. You survived. The faint glow within the blade pulsed. Once. He inhaled sharply. Behind him, Kara spoke. It responds. He nodded slowly. Yes. He did not pretend to understand why. He only accepted that it did. He adjusted the forge again, this time carefully selecting symbols based on pattern rather than guesswork. The rings above shifted their rotation frequency, matching the faint resonance within the blade. The chamber filled with a low harmonic vibration. Not sound, alignment. The fracture brightened. Energy extended from one half toward the other. Stopped just short. Eren held his breath. He did nothing. He had learned long ago that forcing alignment broke things permanently. You had to let systems find equilibrium on their own. Seconds passed, or minutes. Time behaved strangely inside the forge. A faint spark leapt across the fracture. vanished instantly. He smiled. That's progress. Kara stepped closer. Her voice was quieter now. Can it be restored? He considered the question carefully, then answered honestly. Yes. He paused, then added, but not by me. She looked at him. He met her gaze briefly. I can guide it, he said, but it has to choose to become whole again. He returned his attention to the blade. He adjusted the resonance again, carefully, patiently. The energy pathways grew brighter, stronger. The fracture narrowed, not physically, energetically. He could feel it now, not with his hands, with his instincts. The blade was no longer rejecting itself. It was hesitating, recovering. He smiled faintly. You're doing fine, he murmured. Behind him, Kara tilted her head slightly. You encourage it. He shrugged. I encourage everything I repair. He paused. Except printers. She did not understand that. He accepted that. Slowly, carefully, he reduced the forge's output, not shutting it down, allowing the blade to sustain its own alignment. The glow remained, steady, alive. He exhaled deeply. He had not realized he had been holding his breath. He stepped back fully now. The blade hovered in perfect balance, no longer fractured in spirit, only in form. And form, he knew, was the easiest part to restore. He turned to Kara. For the first time in 19 cycle, he said quietly, it wants to be whole. Silence filled the forge. Not empty silence, hopeful silence. And for the first time since arriving on Ironscar, Eren realized that he was no longer simply repairing a weapon. He was helping something remember itself. The sword did not repair itself all at once. It would have been easier if it had. Dramatic flashes of light, a triumphant hum, the two halves snapping together as if 19 cycles of silence had been nothing more than a brief inconvenience. That was how machines behaved when they were simple. This was not simple. Eren stood before the forge, watching the suspended blade with the quiet patience he had learned over a lifetime of fixing things no one else believed could be fixed. The fracture still existed, a thin line dividing what had once been whole, but it no longer felt like an ending. It felt like a pause that was finally ready to resume. The forge pulsed gently around it, no longer forcing alignment, only supporting it. Queen Kara stood beside him. She had been there for every moment. She had not commanded. She had not questioned. She had only stayed. Eren glanced at her briefly. You know, he said quietly, most people lose interest long before this part. Her long ears shifted slightly. This is the most important part. He smiled faintly. Yes, it is. He turned his attention back to the blade. He adjusted the resonance controls one final time, not increasing the energy, reducing it, allowing the sword to carry its own balance. The forge dimmed. The floating rings slowed. The chamber grew quieter. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the fracture line began to fade. Not with violence, not with force, with acceptance. The internal pathways extended toward one another, reconnecting with quiet certainty. Energy flowed freely again, uninterrupted for the first time since the moment it had been broken. The blade did not snap together. It remembered how to be whole. The fracture vanished. Eren exhaled softly. Well, he murmured, that's a good sign. The sword hovered for another moment, then gently lowered itself onto the platform. Complete, stable, alive. The forge fell silent. No alarms, no dramatic declarations. Just stillness. Kara stepped forward slowly. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for it. Eren noticed that. Not fear, not hesitation, emotion. She wrapped her fingers around the hilt. The moment she touched it, the blade responded. A faint glow spread along its surface, flowing outward from her hand like recognition. She closed her eyes. For several seconds, she said nothing. Eren did not interrupt. Some reunions did not need witnesses. Finally, she opened her eyes again. She turned toward him. There were no words in her expression, only gratitude, relief, and something deeper. She stepped closer. He remained still. Not because he was afraid, because he did not want to disrupt the moment. You restored it, she said softly. He shook his head. No, he replied gently. It restored itself. She studied him. You guided it. He shrugged slightly. I listened. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, complete. He realized in that moment that something inside him had changed. He had spent his entire life repairing things because they were broken. But this had not been about fixing damage. It had been about helping something remember its strength. He had not forced it. He had trusted it. And somehow that trust had been returned. Kara stepped even closer now. Close enough that he could see the subtle shifts in her breathing. Close enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence. For 19 cycles, she said quietly, no one could restore what was lost. Her eyes held his. You did. He hesitated. He did not know what to say. So he said the truth. I didn't want it to stay broken. She watched him for a moment longer. Then without warning, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was not formal, not ceremonial. It was brief, warm, real. His brain, unfortunately, stopped functioning entirely. He stood there frozen, his hands awkwardly at his sides. She stepped back. Her expression remained calm, but her ears had shifted slightly forward. He blinked. I was not prepared for that part of the repair process, he said quietly. She tilted her head. Was it unpleasant? He shook his head immediately. No, he said. No, it was very structurally sound. She did not understand the joke. He accepted that. He exhaled slowly. The forge stood silent behind them. The sword rested in her hand, no longer broken. And for the first time since arriving on Ironscar, he no longer felt like a prisoner. He felt like himself. She studied him again. You are free, she said. The words settled heavily in the air. He realized she meant them. She was not offering it as a gesture. She was giving it as truth. He could leave, return to his people, return to the life he had before. He thought about that. Thought about repair bays filled with broken machines. Thought about systems that obeyed rules, that never changed. He looked at her, at Ironscar, at the forge that had trusted him. He smiled faintly. I think, he said slowly, I'd like to stay a little longer. She did not hide her relief. She did not need to. And somewhere deep within Ironscar, something ancient and patient settled into quiet certainty. Not everything that was broken needed to remain that way. Not every stranger needed to remain a stranger. And sometimes the most important repairs were not the ones made with tools, but the ones made with trust.